The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes was that the ceiling wasn't mine. It was carved from ivory and gold, patterns swirling across like a painting from some long-forgotten era. Candles flickered in tall stands, and silk curtains framed the windows where sunlight streamed through. This wasn't my bedroom. This wasn't even my world. I stumbled to the mirror, my heart hammering, and froze. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. He was beautiful in a fragile, almost ethereal way. Pale skin like porcelain, lips curved too perfectly, silver-gray eyes glimmering like a lake at dawn. His long hair was braided and pinned with a golden ornament, heavy with jewels. I raised a trembling hand. The reflection followed. This isn't me. Before I could breathe, the door swung open. A maid entered, bowing so deeply her forehead nearly touched the ground. "Your Highness," she said. "The carriage is ready. The Alpha King awaits you." Her words hit me like stones. Alpha King? What kind of medieval nonsense? But then it came. Memories. Not mine, but flooding into my head like a river breaking its dam. This body belonged to the Omega Prince of the Southern Kingdom, known for being spoiled, weak, fragile. And now he was being married off to the most feared man in the land, the Alpha King of the North. Rumors said he killed his enemies without hesitation, that he had no heart, no mercy, that every consort he took had vanished, never seen again. And I was supposed to be his bride. My knees buckled. The maid rushed forward. "Your Highness? Are you unwell?" I forced myself to nod. I'm fine." But inside, I was screaming. The wedding was a blur. The great cathedral was filled with nobles and priests, their jeweled robes glittering under chandeliers. Trumpets blared, and the scent of incense hung thick in the air. I walked down the aisle, my body trembling inside silken robes I had never worn before. Every step felt like I was being dragged to my execution. And there he was, the Alpha King. Tall, broad-shouldered. His long black hair framed a face carved in steel, sharp jawline, eyes colder than ice. His armor was dark as midnight, trimmed in silver. He looked at me as though I were no more significant than a speck of dust. When I reached him, he took my hand. His grip was strong, but there was no tenderness. Only control. His voice was low, a whisper meant only for me. "Keep silent. Fulfill your duty. Obey, and you will live." My blood ran cold. The ceremony went on. The priests spoke of unity, of peace between kingdoms. But I barely heard. My ears rang with fear. When the final vows were spoken, the crowd erupted into cheers. But the Alpha King didn't smile. He didn't even look at me. He only released my hand, as if the entire event had been nothing but a transaction. The carriage ride to his palace was silent. Outside, rolling hills gave way to dark forests, and then, on the horizon, I saw it. The fortress of the Alpha King. Black stone towers rose into the stormy sky, banners snapping with the emblem of a wolf. The walls were massive, unyielding, as if daring anyone to challenge them. I swallowed hard. That was where I would live, where I would sleep, where, for all I knew, I might die. The king finally spoke. "Do not mistake this for a union of love. You are here because your kingdom begged for peace. Do your part, and perhaps you will survive longer than the others." My stomach turned. The others? He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. As we entered the gates, guards bowed low. Soldiers lined the courtyard, armored and expressionless. The palace itself was vast, but cold, marble and steel, every corner sharp. The king dismounted, not once offering his hand to me. I was left to stumble after him, tripping on the weight of my robes. Servants whispered as I passed. I caught fragments. "He won't last. The king will tire of him soon. Another lamb to the slaughter." My chest tightened. Inside the great hall, the king finally stopped. He turned to me, his eyes sharp enough to cut. "You will stay in the eastern chambers," he said. "Do not wander. Do not interfere in matters beyond you. If you wish to live, you will do as I command." His words slammed into me. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand why fate had thrown me into this nightmare. But I couldn't. My voice stuck in my throat. The king's gaze lingered on me for one more chilling second. Then he turned and walked away, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. And just like that, I was alone. That night, I lay in a bed too big for me, staring at the gilded ceiling. My body trembled under the heavy blankets, my mind racing. Why me? Why this world? Why this marriage? I thought about his words, his coldness, the whispers of vanished consorts. I thought about how the nobles had stared at me with pity, as though my life were already over. Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. But then I clenched my fists. No. If fate had thrown me into this body, into this cursed marriage, then I had no choice but to survive. I'll live, I whispered into the empty room. No matter what it takes. I'll survive him. I'll survive this palace. I won't be broken. But even as I said it, I couldn't stop the chill crawling up my spine. Because deep down I knew. The real danger wasn't just the palace. It was the man I was now married to. The ruthless Alpha King. And his eyes, colder than death, promised only one thing. That surviving him might be impossible. The palace was nothing like the home I had once known. It wasn't warm. It wasn't welcoming. It was a labyrinth of stone and shadows. Hallways stretched endlessly, lined with banners of wolves and battles long past. Every torch flickered as if the flames themselves feared to burn too brightly here. The servants never smiled. When they bowed to me, their eyes carried only mockery. At meals, I sat alone at a long table carved from dark oak. Dozens of dishes were prepared, yet not once did the king share a meal with me. His seat remained empty, a silent reminder that I wasn't worthy of his company. Nights were worse. I lay in silken sheets, but the silence was crushing. I knew the king was somewhere in the fortress, breathing, walking, ruling, but he may as well have been on another continent. He never came to me, and yet I could feel his presence, like a shadow lingering in the corners of the palace, watching. The first incident happened a week after our marriage. I had been walking through the gardens at dusk, trying to clear my head. The air was crisp, the flowers blooming in shades of violet and silver beneath the fading light. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. Then, WHSSH. An arrow whistled past my ear, so close I felt the wind cut my skin. It buried itself into the stone wall behind me with a sharp crack. My body froze. My pulse thundered. From the bushes, a cloaked figure leapt, dagger flashing. I stumbled back, terror strangling my voice. Before I could scream, a blade gleamed through the air. The assassin fell at my feet, his throat cut so swiftly I barely saw the strike. I lifted my head. On the balcony above, silhouetted against the setting sun, stood the Alpha King. His sword dripped red. His gaze locked with mine for a heartbeat, cold, unreadable. Then he turned and vanished into the shadows of the palace. The garden fell silent. I stood there, trembling, the corpse of my would-be killer sprawled beside me. No alarm was raised. No investigation was announced. By morning, the body was gone as if it had never existed. When I asked the servants, they only bowed and said, "We know nothing, Your Highness." But I knew. He had saved me. The question was why? After that night, I began noticing the little things. A wine glass shattering in the hand of a noble who had dared to insult me at a banquet. A servant disappearing after I fell ill from poisoned tea. Guards tightening formation when I stepped outside, though no orders had been given aloud. It was as if invisible hands kept me alive, moving the strings around me. And I knew who held those strings. The Alpha King. But if he wanted me alive, then why did he never speak to me? Why did his eyes still look at me as if I were nothing? It all came to a head during the storm. Rain hammered against the palace walls that night, wind howling like wolves. I couldn't sleep. The weight of silence pressed too heavily, so I wandered into the grand stairway, clutching a lantern. The marble was slick from the storm's humidity. My foot slipped. The lantern crashed, glass shattering, and I fell hard, my hand scraping against the edge of a step. Blood bloomed across my palm. I hissed in pain, clutching the wound. Careless. The voice cut through the storm like a blade. I looked up. The Alpha King stood at the foot of the stairs, cloak billowing from the wind that swept in through an open window. His eyes gleamed in the lightning's flash. He strode toward me, every step commanding, until he was kneeling at my side. Before I could protest, he pulled a handkerchief from his cloak and wrapped it around my bleeding palm. "You should not wander alone," he muttered. His tone was sharp, but his touch was steady, gentle, almost trembling. I stared at him, words dying on my tongue. He was so close. I could see the faint scar at his jaw, the stormlight flickering across the dark depths of his eyes. For a moment, I thought I saw something there. Not coldness, not hatred, but pain. Why? The word slipped from me before I could stop it. Why save me? Why protect me? His hands stilled. His gaze met mine, sharp and searching. Then, just as quickly, he released me. He rose to his feet, his expression shuddered once more. "Do not mistake my actions for kindness," he said flatly. You are mine, and I do not allow what is mine to be touched by others." He turned, his cloak sweeping as he vanished into the storm. I sat frozen, the handkerchief still warm around my palm. My heart pounded. He said it wasn't kindness. He said I belonged to him. But the way his hands had trembled, the way his eyes had lingered on mine, I couldn't believe him. Days passed, and the palace seemed to change. Whispers followed me in the halls, some sharper, some curious. A few servants began bowing lower, offering hesitant smiles. It was as if they sensed that perhaps I wasn't as weak as they had believed. But the nobles remained cruel. At a court assembly, one of them smirked as he stepped too close. "Your Highness," he sneered, "you must forgive our rudeness. We are simply unused to seeing such fragility standing beside our king." The chamber chuckled cruelly. My fists tightened. I wanted to speak, but before I could, the noble suddenly yelped. His wine glass had shattered in his hand, shards slicing his palm. Blood dripped onto the floor. When I looked up, the king was staring at him with eyes so cold they could freeze fire. The hall fell silent. No one dared to laugh again. And for the briefest moment, when the king's gaze shifted toward me, there was something in his eyes, something fierce, something protective. My chest tightened. That night, as thunder rolled again in the distance, I sat by my window, clutching the handkerchief he had left me. I should have feared him. I should have hated him. But all I could think about was the way his hand had steadied mine, the way his presence seemed to guard me even when he wasn't near. I pressed the cloth to my lips, whispering into the storm. "Who are you, really?" The palace gave me no answer. But I knew one thing for certain. The ruthless Alpha King was not as heartless as he pretended to be. And that truth terrified me more than anything. The palace library became my only sanctuary. It was a vast chamber filled with towering shelves of old tomes and scrolls, lit dimly by lanterns that flickered against the stone. Few dared to enter, which meant I could escape here without the constant whispers and stares. At first, I read to distract myself from the suffocating tension of the palace. But the more I searched, the more I began to uncover fragments of a darker truth. The name of the Omega Prince, the man whose body I now inhabited, appeared in several records. Mentions in letters, in council minutes, in intercepted reports. And what I pieced together chilled me. He had not been innocent. The Omega Prince had been conspiring with foreign powers, meeting secretly with spies, planning to betray the Alpha King. And that explained everything, the coldness in the king's eyes, the cruelty in his silence. He hadn't married for peace alone. He had married an enemy. My hands trembled as I traced the ink on a fragile scroll. So that's it. He thinks I am still him. But I wasn't. I clenched my fists. If fate put me here, then I will prove I'm not the traitor he believes I am. I'll prove I am different. That resolve began to show in small ways. When a servant dropped a tray of food, scattering dishes across the floor, I knelt and helped her pick them up. Gasps rippled through the hall. No royal would lower themselves like that. When nobles mocked me for being fragile, I lifted my chin and answered calmly instead of shrinking away. At first they laughed louder, but soon the laughter died. They were unsettled, confused, and the king noticed. At council meetings, I felt his gaze linger on me longer than before. When I spoke, carefully, cautiously, his expression no longer dismissed me outright. It was subtle, but it was change. The true shift happened during the Midsummer Festival. The palace transformed that night. Lanterns floated into the sky, glowing like stars, while fireworks painted the heavens with bursts of color. Music filled the courtyard, and people danced, laughed, drank. I stood alone at the edge of the balcony, staring up at the fireworks. For the first time since my arrival, I felt something like awe. A voice broke the moment. "You don't hide as much anymore." I turned. The king stood beside me, dressed not in armor but in robes of black silk trimmed with silver. The firelight cast his features into sharp relief, making him look even more untouchable. "I realized hiding does me no good," I said softly. His gaze searched mine. "You're not like him." My breath caught. He stepped closer, so close the warmth of his presence pressed against me. His hand brushed mine on the railing. Barely a touch, but enough to send sparks racing through me. "I'm not," I whispered. "I never will be." The fireworks thundered above us, but I barely heard. His eyes, dark and stormy, held mine as if testing the truth of my words. And then, before I could blink, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. It was brief, hesitant, but fire rushed through my veins, and my heart leapt into my throat. When he pulled back, his face was unreadable. "Do not make me regret this," he murmured, then turned and walked away. I pressed trembling fingers to my lips. It was the first time I realized that maybe, just maybe, the ruthless Alpha King was capable of love. But palace walls have ears. I began to notice shadows following me. Servants who lingered too long. Nobles who watched too closely. At night, I heard whispers outside my chamber doors, rumors of plots, conspiracies. The tension in the air thickened with each passing day, until finally it exploded. The night of the royal banquet began in splendor. Long tables filled with feasts, goblets overflowing with wine, music and laughter echoing across the grand hall. I tried to relax, though the weight of stares pressed heavily against me. The king sat at the head of the table, his presence as commanding as ever. Halfway through the feast, a soldier burst through the doors, kneeling before the throne. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but urgent evidence has come to light." My blood ran cold. The soldier held out a bundle of parchment. Seals stamped with my insignia. Letters detailing meetings with spies. Plans to poison the king. Gasps swept through the hall. Nobles leapt to their feet, shouting, "Traitor! He plots against the throne. Execute him." I stood frozen, my heart crashing against my ribs. The king's gaze burned into me. Dark, unreadable. "No," my voice cracked. "It isn't true. I didn't write those letters. I would never." But no one listened. The evidence was damning. The nobles clamored louder, demanding my immediate execution. I turned desperately to the king, my chest aching. "Please, you have to believe me." For the first time, I saw his mask falter. His jaw clenched. His eyes flickered with something like doubt and pain. He didn't answer. He only stared. And in that silence, my heart shattered. Because maybe after everything, he still didn't trust me. The banquet descended into chaos. Guards closed in. Nobles shouted for my death. And all I could do was stand there, tears burning my eyes, as the man I had begun to love said nothing. The world spun around me. And in that dizzying storm of betrayal and fear, one thought pierced through everything. If he chooses to believe them, then I am already dead. The banquet ended in uproar. Nobles screamed for blood, slamming fists against the table. Servants scattered, terrified. Guards encircled me, hands on their swords. I stood frozen at the center of it all, the so-called evidence clutched in the king's hand. Letters I had never written. Letters forged with my seal. My knees threatened to give way, but I forced myself upright. I would not fall, not in front of them. "Your Majesty," one of the nobles barked, his voice sharp and venomous. "There can be no doubt. The consort plots treason against you. Execute him now, before he strikes again." The hall erupted with shouts of agreement. I turned to the king, my voice trembling. "Please, you know me. You must see that this isn't true." But his face was carved from stone, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed with unreadable thoughts. My chest ached. After everything, the glances, the rare tenderness, that stolen kiss beneath the fireworks, was it all for nothing? If he doesn't believe me now, then it's over. My life ends tonight. I was dragged before the throne the next morning. The grand hall had been transformed into something like a courtroom. Nobles lined the sides, eyes sharp and cruel. The king sat high above on his throne, robed in black and silver, the very image of merciless authority. I knelt on the cold stone floor, chains clamped around my wrists. The accusations rang out one after another. Treason, espionage, attempted regicide. Each word cut deeper, though I already felt numb. Finally, silence fell. The king's deep voice echoed through the chamber. "Do you deny these charges?" I raised my head, meeting his gaze with everything I had left. "Yes, I deny them. I am not the traitor you think I am. I never was." The nobles sneered. One shouted, "Lies!" Another cried, "Spare us your false innocence." But I didn't look at them. I only looked at him. "Believe me or not, I don't care what they say," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I just need you to believe me." For the first time, the king's mask cracked. His fingers clenched around the armrest of his throne, the faintest tremor running through his hand. The chamber held its breath. Then one noble stepped forward. "If your Majesty will not act, then I will. The Omega consort is a danger to us all." He unsheathed a dagger and charged. Gasps tore through the hall. The blade arced toward me, but never landed. A blur of black silk swept in front of me. The king. He caught the noble's wrist, twisted it brutally until bones snapped, and hurled the man to the ground. Guards rushed to seize him, But the king didn't move away. Instead, he stood above me, shield between me and the world, his voice a low growl that silenced the hall. Enough! The word thundered through the chamber, more powerful than any roar of battle. He turned, his eyes sweeping across the nobles. Do you take me for a fool? You parade forged letters, fabricated lies, and expect me to kill my own consort. The nobles froze, paling. The king raised the forged letters high, and with one swift motion, ripped them apart. The pieces fluttered to the floor like falling ash. My consort, he declared, is no traitor. He is my mate. The hall erupted in shocked cries. Mate. The word struck me like a bolt of lightning. My heart pounded, my breath caught, tears blurred my vision. The king looked down at me, his eyes softer than I had ever seen. From the moment I touched you, I knew. I tried to deny it. I tried to bury it beneath hatred and suspicion. But fate cannot be denied. You are mine. He knelt, his hand reaching for me. With a gentle strength, he unclasped the chains from my wrists. And in that moment, the world seemed to still. Chaos followed. The king ordered a full investigation. Within hours, the true traitors were dragged into the open. Nobles who had secretly supported the enemy, desperate to cover their tracks by painting me as guilty. Their confessions spilled forth under pressure, every lie unraveling. I was cleared. But even as relief washed over me, my heart remained fragile. Later that night, I stood on the palace balcony, the cool wind brushing against my face. Freedom tasted bittersweet. Behind me, footsteps. I turned to see him. No crown, no armor, only a man tired and solemn. I failed you, he said quietly. I should have trusted you from the start. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You had every reason not to. The one before me, he really did betray you. His expression darkened, pain flickering across his face. I stepped closer, my voice soft but steady. But I'm not him. I'll never be him. For a long moment, silence. Only the wind between us. Then he reached for me. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing away a stray tear. You're right, he whispered. You're not him. You're mine. And before I could reply, his lips captured mine in a kiss that was no longer hesitant, no longer restrained. This was a kiss that claimed, that promised, that burned away every doubt and fear. I melted against him, my hands clutching at his robes, my heart soaring. At last, the walls between us had crumbled. The next morning, the throne room was filled again, but this time not for judgment, but for celebration. The king stood tall, his arm wrapped firmly around me as he addressed the gathered court. From this day forth, my consort shall stand beside me not as a prisoner, not as a traitor, but as my queen. Cheers erupted from the loyal, while the traitors knelt in shame. My heart raced as he turned to me, pulling me close. Together, he said. Always. And then, before the eyes of the entire kingdom, he kissed me. Not a fleeting touch, not a secret moment, but a declaration. A promise. And as the crowd roared, as the kingdom bore witness, I realized something I had never dared to believe before. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was loved. Truly, fiercely, irrevocably loved.